As you just heard, this meeting is being recorded, so we'll post it on the town website. Ask that anybody who joins the meeting, please identify yourself on Zoom, and if you make a comment, identify yourself as well by using your voice. You have the option as well to use the chat function by sending me a chat directly. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them as we go. If this meeting gets interrupted, I'll end the meeting and send out new instructions so we can carry on the business of the council. Last but not least, just ask that if you are not taking part in the conversation, if you could please just turn off your video so that the view screen for those participating is working as best it can. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I called the council meeting to order, and the agenda item was to confirm my nominations to various committees and boards. And due to the fact that I haven't finalized the list, I am going to move those nominations to the January meeting. And given that committees start meeting now, and anybody on a committee, if there is a committee meeting, the people stay in the office until they're replaced anyway, so it's not really a problem. So with that, I need a motion to adjourn this meeting so we can begin the work session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Barr, and somebody second. Heller, I think. Oh, Sturko second. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, thank you very much. Now I will, excuse me, turn over the work session to our distinguished council president, Mr. Steve.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Sturko.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Matt, do you have the agenda to pull up? I was going through my email. I didn't find a copy of it or any read aheads.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Great.
So here I will quickly try to send that over to you. But the first agenda item we had is just a continuation of the discussion from last month about the variance process in town and whether or not we wanted to look at that and whether it's working as intended, especially allowing for hearings before a county permit is obtained.
So we started that. Thank you very much, Matt. We started that discussion at our last work session. I think that Kabir had an excellent point that that we've introduced a number of changes, and still early days in terms of assessing how they're playing out, and we probably don't want to take action right away, but I think this is an important topic for us to sort of keep tabs on, because I'm not sure it's in the town's best interest to have contractors sort of play whack-a-mole with the council, and from a cost perspective, I think in general it costs the town more to process each of these applications than it does than the fees that the applicants submit, in particular for legal and consulting engineer support. So I just think it's something we should keep tabs on. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts, or maybe move on to the next topic. But let's go around the room, virtual room. Robin?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the reason why we allowed it in the first place is that it's very expensive for developers, contractors to go before the county board. And if they've been approved by the county board before a variance has been considered by us, and we deny the variance, it means they have to go through another hearing because they have to change their plans to the county board, which is more expensive for them. So that's the reason why we did it. So at the very least, we've got to balance that against what you call the town's interest in thinking about changes. Okay, I'll stop there.
But also you don't remember the fees could be adjusted, and also there is a purpose to government, and there's a cost, and you weigh that against the value of it. And so I don't think that you should dismiss it only because of all these costs. These costs are what are contributing to our quality of life. Okay, that's all I want to say. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair.
Well, you have the most history of anybody else here, so I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. And I don't think we're talking about an either or. There might be some ways we can fine tune our approach. One thought that comes to mind is, if somebody comes to us with an application and we don't approve it, then maybe we say there has to be a 2-month period before they can come back. And I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying there are different approaches that we could use to try to make the system perhaps more effective. Debbie, do you have any thoughts or comments at this point? I thought I saw Debbie.
Sorry. I guess what I'm wondering is, what would be the best approach for our residents? What makes sense for them and makes this easier for them? Because, I think, going through renovations or building a new house is difficult. And are we making it harder for them? Now, I'm not saying we should make it easy. I think we need to do the right thing. What's right for them and what's right for us as a governing body? And I'm not sure what that is. I wonder what other communities do to lighten this load.
Absolutely, and we should probably explore in greater detail what other communities in the area do. I know that Matt has done a survey for us in the past. Probably worth updating it. Thank you. Is Shannon with us?
She's not coming. She's got her Mickey ears on. She's in Disney World.
Nice. And Kabir can't make it either, right? So it's just, or is Kabir here?
I think he's probably not going to make it, but he may at a later time. He's not here at the moment.
Yeah, he said it would be unlikely he was going to make it.
Okay, well, let's move it along. Okay, council work sessions. What's the next agenda item? Thank you. I got your email, Matt. I'm just opening it up.
Sorry. No problem. Next was and Shannon had sort of flagged this at the last meeting, but our new tree code, and Tolbert's joined us as well. Whether the threshold that we set is too low, and the reforestation requirements for hazardous tree removal. And I thought maybe Ron could maybe speak a little bit more in detail about how we might balance that with when we're approving permits. Again, it might be something like you said with the last item, Steve, that we wait and see, how it works over the course of several hearings before we do a thorough evaluation. But since council member had flagged it, I just wanted to add it to the agenda.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Ah, the heck? Sorry, just. Sorry, somehow I just deleted the folder as I was extracting it. Can you bring up
Oh,
what's
yeah.
the next agenda item?
So, let's see. So, did you want to just move on from that one, or do you want me to share my screen or just resend it to you?
If you could share your screen, please.
Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, okay, we're doing that. Okay, I've got my agenda pulled up now.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I'm having some.
So
There we go.
citations, hearing requirements.
So I sort of just gave a brief introduction in the document, just reminding. So in May, the council adopted a new tree code, which whereas previously, if it was fewer than 3 trees, the town arborist would issue a report, and assuming he recommended approval, the mayor or the mayor's designee could issue an administrative permit for 1 or 2 trees. The Parks and Natural Resources Committee felt like the impact of taking out large trees might not be completely realized when we're looking at gross number of trees. And so instead, they changed the criteria so that it would be the total diameter of trees, regardless of the number of trees. And we had a hearing, earlier this month where the resident had, I think, 2 trees. Both of them were, 35 plus inches in diameter. Both of them were hazardous. And so the council had a hearing on it. And I think there was a little bit of discussion about to what extent can the council impose reforestation in an instance where the tree is hazardous. So that was part of the question. And then, whereas, it probably wasn't applicable for this one, but the question of, is 24 inches, which is what the new kind of cutoff for it to go to the council, is that the right number? And that especially maybe is something that we would look at over time. But that was sort of what was brought up previously, and what triggered this agenda item. I don't know, Ron, if you want to, I think one of the things that came up at the last hearing was number one, the resident wasn't there, which made it difficult. And Tolbert actually can speak to it a little bit too, because he was able to go over there and talk to the resident and do a site review. But if the trees, there might be an instance where for a resident comes in and says, I have a 35-inch maple tree that I'd like to remove. It's dropping a lot of branches, and I'm worried about it. They have an arborist that comes over and says, yeah, that tree's dying. I recommend you remove it. So they submit a permit application. Tolbert looks at it, and he agrees and says, yeah, by my evaluation, the tree is a hazard as well, so I'd recommend removal. So they would go to the council, and the council might, because you're concerned about the canopy coverage, say, yep, of course, we approved the removal of the hazardous tree. And we just ask that you plant one replacement tree once you take it down. And the resident might say, I'm not paying for a replacement tree. And so instead they leave it there. And I wasn't sure if maybe we would be liable in that instance that the town didn't allow them to remove what we acknowledged was a hazard. That might be an extreme example, but I don't know, Ron. Maybe I'm completely off base with that.
I understand your issue and your concern. And I think it's a legitimate concern. I mean, the first issue with respect to conditional approvals, and generally speaking, we try to avoid those. The council can make a decision with conditions, but not really a conditional decision. And that's because at the time of hearing, before a decision is made, the council has to make findings of fact and conclusions of law. And if, so at the hearing, we have to decide whether or not the tree can be removed. We can't say it can be removed subject to certain things that we'll later determine, because then the council's not really making its required administrative findings and conclusions at the hearing. But how the last hearing proceeded was fine, because the code says here are the criteria to be reviewed for tree removal. No one factor has more weight than the others. So in granting approval, even for a dangerous tree, the council can impose reforestation as a requirement. What I wanted to steer the council away from at the last meeting was saying, we agree that the tree is dangerous and can be removed. And then we will later determine whether or not reforestation is necessary, because that mixes the issue of whether we're actually concluding that reforestation is necessary to allow removal. Again, as you noted, we were in a difficult position because the applicant wasn't there. We didn't have enough information on the record in order to determine whether the lot would accommodate a second tree. On your second issue, are we subjecting ourselves to liability if we acknowledge a tree is dangerous and impose a reforestation requirement, and the applicant refuses to accept that approval and reforest? I don't think we'd be liable unless a court were to find that the condition was egregious, that it was going to cost a ridiculous sum of money to plant a tree. The cost of planting a tree at 2.5 inches in caliper, I don't think that is that expensive, and a court would find it egregious. But I mean, Tolbert, can you give me an estimate how much that costs?
Yeah, there on the market, there's $500 to $600. So
Yeah, so I think a court would say, look, all you had to do was pay $600 to plant a tree, and you assumed the risk of allowing their dangerous tree to remain instead of replanting it, a $600 price tag. That would be my thought there, but obviously litigation cannot be predicted with any certainty.
Thank you, Ron. Matt, do we have any feedback from the resident on that particular issue? Were they okay with our?
Well,
our statement?
they did not want to replant a tree. I think in part they felt like they had enough trees on their property. Tolbert, I know you did a site review over there, and had said that there was canopy coverage on that site. But I think Tolbert had also said in his opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tolbert, but that he felt there was room to plant a tree on the property as well.
yeah, the trees in the tree that exists it's a very large red maple in the back, right next to the house. And And I mean, like I said during the last meeting, where the two are being removed, there's room to plant a tree in the front or in the front side. So, but they do have a one canopy tree on property, and then they have some mature hollies in the back along the property line.
So I think in this, in this instance, they probably will, part of what we had said earlier this month was that if they wanted to, appeal or contest the reforestation, that they would come back in January and ask essentially for an amended permit, based on some new facts that they could present to the council. So yeah, I suppose perhaps it's intending as, or it's working as intended at the moment, or we just need more, more case studies to do a real evaluation of it.
Can I ask a question? Do we run into residents balking at planting trees to do reforestation if we ask them? Is this a one-off from this particular resident?
Well, I don't know. So part of the reason we implemented this new rule was so that the council could put in reforestation requirements on tree removals. Previously, if one or two trees were removed, that was it. And we don't track whether people plant trees on their property or if a tree sprouts naturally. But I think there was some concern that we maybe weren't replenishing our canopy at the same rate that it was being removed.
So the other thing is when the reforestation plan is required, whether it's for construction or if three or more trees are removed, there's a bond associated with it. So the replanting occurs if there's a bond. There's only one property where they walked away from the bond, I think. So the bonding is an incentive to plant, because bonding's about the same price as a tree at this point too. The bonding's $500 a tree, and that's about what it costs to plant a tree. So most people don't balk at when it's bonded. They plant the trees and get the bond back.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that this is actually the second person who said that they don't want to plant a tree. We had another one a couple of months ago who said the same thing. And I think we should make them do a little bit more work, especially because these are some major trees that are coming down. In fact, just come to the council and explain what are the new facts that say that you don't need to plant a tree.
Right.
I agree with that.
No, I'd also like to share with the council, and I'm thinking of writing a little article for the journal on this. I discovered a county program called Trees Montgomery. And through this program, Montgomery County is going to plant 2 10 to 12 foot tall river birches in my yard. It's a Montgomery County program to increase shade trees or canopy trees in the county. And there's no cost to the individual.
Wow.
So I would think that other residents would be able to do that. The only issue is it's a popular program, so the waiting list is about 6 to 9 months. But that's not that bad. Anyhow, that if there are residents who are if the cost is a deciding factor on whether or not to plant a canopy tree, I think there are alternatives. Plus, if this is something that the town is interested in enough, perhaps as part of stormwater management, the town could elect to offer some sort of a tree planting service also for canopy trees. Just some thoughts.
Hmm.
Okay, let's see. So the next, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, let's move on to urban planner RFP. Can you give us an update, Matt?
Yeah, so I included for the council a draft RFP, sort of based on some of the work that had been done in some of the similar communities around us. Gave the background and asked for somebody to do, with Ron and Doug's help, tried to stay away from the character study language, because I think some people felt that might be pejorative, but wanted to do a comprehensive look at our code and the existing houses, and to help us put together essentially a guide of how we might maintain appropriate structure sizes on our single family lots, looking at our code, what's available to us, what some of the neighboring communities have, and what the existing houses are. I suspect they'll look at housing height, wall length, wall plane height, impervious surface coverage, and the like. So I think the plan was to, I kind of broke it up into a 3-step process, and one was to do a review of the homes in our code, and do some sort of analysis of whether or not the massing of houses has been changed by new development, especially over the last 15 or so years, and to maybe then hold a public meeting as well to get feedback from residents, and then to dive into an assessment of our code, and finally to make some recommendations to the council on possible code changes or areas that the council could then have a broader discussion and have a little bit more data backing them up to determine what, if any, changes we wanted to make to our code. So that's kind of the long and short of it. I don't know if you had any specific thoughts about this RFP, but the plan was then to put this out, and by the spring, we could then hire a contractor for this work and get going in the spring, around April.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Appreciate you pulling the threads together from our previous council work sessions and discussions. So I'm excited. Let's just go around. Robin, do you have some thoughts, comments?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I did read the RFP, Matt, and you need to correct one error, which is that you say the earlier houses developed date from the 1930s. No, that's not true. The earliest house was first occupied in 1893. And that's the house that is at the top of Surrey on Dorset. That's the oldest house in town. And there were a few others around there that were also in the 1890s. So that's when the homes date from. The more general point is there is extremely strong pressure on developers when they buy land here to make a profit above what the cost of the land plus the development is.
Mm-hmm.
The land at the moment costs over $1 million most of the time. And the development's probably costing another $500,000 or so to knock it down and build it up again. So they've got to build something that is going to be priced at something in the 2 million range to begin to even make a profit. And if they want a bigger profit, obviously they go up from there. You're not going to get a 2 million home with a 3-bedroom ranch. So they're building bigger homes. And that's what's happening. And now if we get this planner to come in and do the measure and everything and comes up with some recommendations, they're still going to want to build to every inch the code will allow them to build because of that strong pressure. And how are we going to change that?
Can't we change it by changing our code?
Yeah,
You know, if our code says you can only build so high, or you can only build so wide, or whatever, you can only use so much. Maybe we're letting people use too much of their land to build on. Maybe that's why we're having all this stormwater management problems. You know, maybe we have to take a really rough, a really tough stand to
Well,
make
if-
it right.
If we get builders to actually buy property, which they may not, they might be so discouraged they wouldn't, they're going to come in with variances, and we're going to get more and more contested variance hearings, is what's going to happen.
And we just say
We're
no.
getting some of those.
right. But so I think your concerns are really well-founded and well-articulated, Rob, and I appreciate it. I guess my perspective is I'm sort of, in my mind, I'm phasing what we're doing. And I think this RFP is just the first phase where we will get data on what is the situation in the town. Then the council should, and I think could decide that, I don't know, maybe we don't want houses as high as the county allows. So we might start to, based on the data, we might just modestly trim the envelope that builders can build within. And I think we'll also get data that can help us in assessing variances. You know, I don't think we should be in a situation where the town resident or the contractor needs to tell us how many houses on the street have carports or two-car garages. It'd be great to have our own database on that information. But I think we need to see what the data shows. And you're right, there's always going to be that. There's going to be a strong economic incentive driving developers and residents to maximize what they can put on their plot of land. And that's not necessarily bad. It's just the council needs to determine what's in the best interest of the town as a whole in terms of
Right.
whether or not there should be any constraints beyond what the county imposes.
I agree with that.
Pardon?
I don't know. The other thing is, I'm not really worried about developers in that if they don't want to buy our houses, if they can't get enough money out of them, they're always buyers for our houses. You know, I just don't, I wouldn't worry about developers. Can they make enough money? If they can't, then they shouldn't build here. You know, people will buy houses and renovate it themselves. You know? Just saying.
It's an
Um,
interesting perspective.
Well, I think what should be driving our interest is more what's in the interest of the town,
Right.
which I think is town character, but also value of real estate. And we can try and exercise our judgment. And to a certain extent, we're already starting to, not just a certain extent, we are absolutely imposing a more restrictive, a more constraining code now than the town had 4 years ago. So I think we'll start to see whether that's a significant hurdle or just a small speed bump for developers to comply.
One other element I think that this will help in, this is something that Council Member Heller had mentioned in our previous discussion, but if we can get recommendations even on simplifying our code and making it easier to understand for residents to know what they can and cannot build without a variance. I think that that will be helpful. If we have some visual tools, for example, they might help us build off of some of the comprehensive code changes that we made that Councilmember Peel had helped push through in terms of organizing our code in a way that's easier to digest and understand. That could be a happy byproduct of this as well, even if, as the council president said, if it just gives us data for the council then to consider code changes and code restriction changes in the future.
Okay, let me also interject here that with this new council, now it's almost not new anymore, but anyway, I still think it's important that we look at some version of a welcome letter, so to speak, that you all approve of, so that people will have some guidelines when they're looking at properties, because we still get phone calls. I don't know about you, Mr. Town Manager, but I still get phone calls from realtors and people like, what is the possibility of, looking at this property, what is the possibility of these changes I want to make? And it's basically, it's not even appropriate for me to answer, but I don't want to, but I think that we also have a duty to the public to provide information. But as our town attorney has pointed out, we have to make sure that we don't step out of boundaries, and we should all know what we can and cannot say.
Yep.
And I
Thank
think
you.
that a majority, I mean, some of you ran on this issue when you ran for the council.
Right. Okay, I think it's a great idea that perhaps as part of the assessing the results of this survey, we'll also look at relook at the question or the possibility of some sort of a letter or information
Right.
page on our website.
Because as we know, isn't this true, Mr. Town Attorney? Chevy Chase Village has such a document. Isn't that right?
They're not my client, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if they had
I
that.
think they
I'll
do.
look right now.
Yeah, I think they do. But do any of your other clients have such a letter?
The town of Chevy Chase has a user manual. None have a letter that I'm aware of.
But the user
County-
manual serves the same purpose as this welcome letter, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a layman's presentation of the building code to help people understand it better.
Okay, good.
In the county has a nice pamphlet on the variance process and what an applicant should be aware of that they have to prove in order to get a building variance.
Yeah,
Which
I think that is a great service to the public, and we can make sure that when realtors come in here that don't work in the town on a regular basis, and they need to, that pamphlet should be available when there were open houses. I mean, we did that. So when I was president of the board at 4620 North Park Avenue, we developed that kind of letter, and we made sure that the realtors had it at their open houses or on their websites or everything. Just because you're going to avoid problems down the, this is going to make it easier for the council to function rather than getting strong-armed at the last minute for a variance or some other thing that if they had known about from the beginning, they wouldn't have had the problem. This is why the brilliant Julie Greenberg originally suggested this, which has been like 4 years maybe now.
Matt, are you taking notes here? I mean, one of those suggestions is there, I think is real and I'm supported, is if we get some direction from the consultant on the idea of a user manual a la Town of Chevy Chase or a welcome letter that is a common sense description of our building code, and particularly its differences from the county code, might be a good idea.
Yeah, I am taking notes. I'll add this to the RFP if you think it's worthwhile. And I think that I do think that having some visual guidelines also can be helpful too. If it was just broken up, here's our height, here's our setback requirements, here's X, Y, and Z, and then to have visual representation can also be helpful. But in any case, yes, absolutely. No, I think it'd be useful to have some help, have them help us develop a good working document that serves that purpose as well.
Okay. Great discussion. Next topic is code amendment recommendation regarding house numbers from the Public Safety Committee. Matt, can you give us a brief update?
Yeah, so, and actually the committee chair is here as well, so I think he's not to put Kumar on the spot, but I think he's available to answer questions as well if the council has any. But at the last council meeting, we deferred action, deferred adoption of this code amendment. I think there were some questions as to whether this requirement, the way that we list it in our code, should have it applicable to all properties, and have it ostensibly at that point it would be part of our regular town surveys and code enforcement work to ensure that houses are appropriately identified, versus, and I think this is where maybe the committee had the nexus of the idea came from, was that the requirement was explicitly stated during and after construction, and especially new construction, and that it internally as well is part of our sign-off process. So when Doug does his final review and then tells Linda and me, yeah, it's okay, this project looks okay, let's return their bond, it's to code and it's to the plans that were submitted. This is another check mark that we would have to be sure of, that okay, yep, and the house is adequately showing its house number so that emergency vehicles can see it. So the current draft that the council has, Ron can probably speak more to what his thinking was. He had written it so that it applied blanket across the board. And yeah, Ron, I think I'll just turn it over to you, because rather than me trying to paraphrase.
Sure. So I looked at the county code. The county imposes this requirement as a property maintenance standard. And it made sense to me to do the same type of thing, rather than requiring the applicant to merely attest that they will comply during construction. that the requirement to have the house number ought to be ongoing. Is although unlikely, someone could attest that they're going to comply, have the house numbers up before their permit is finalized, and then take the house numbers down the next day. And the town wouldn't have no enforcement capabilities. So if we make it an ongoing requirement, then that prevents someone from removing their house numbers after the permit is closed out. Now, I recognize that, it's probably a remote risk, but I mean, that was my thought with the perpetual requirement. And the county,
Sorry, please continue.
no problem. And the county applies it to all buildings. And so my thought there was, I was concerned that a town resident might be under the impression, well, the town only requires it for new construction, therefore, if my house is existing, I don't have to have a house number, even though it is required under county law. So it just made sense to me to have a concurrent enforcement there, to avoid confusion. And then I think the last big item is the committee did recommend that the code expressly say our building permit administrator or inspector is going to check off at permit finalization that requirement is being met or has been met, which certainly we can do. We can add to the code. I didn't add that because in writing the code, trying to conform the code to sort of standard practices, and we don't enumerate everything that the inspector has to look at. So it made sense to me not to call this out specially, but we certainly could. As discussed, we do call out specially that there's going to be wall check and height check surveys. Those I think are good to put in the code because it puts folks on notice that they have to pay the cost for a survey. And that was my thought there. And I'm finished my comments.
Okay, I guess Kabir asked a question I thought that resonated with me. If this is a county regulation, why are we dealing with it at all?
Yeah, and I think the answer there would be so that we have enforcement authority, because you can't always count on the county to enforce the county code. So if the town feels like this is a significant issue that the town wants to get involved in and wants to be able to independently enforce, then that's why we'd amend the code. Or there's middle ground too. We could just remind people that it's a requirement and leave the enforcement to the county.
Except that's the whole purpose of having the town, Mr. President, is that we have our own layer of enforcement on things. That's one of the reasons why we're having that problem with the resident that parks her car on the lawn, and a lot of other things that there's a lot of other violations around here that the county doesn't necessarily enforce. So that's why, to give it and plus I think it's also good that that this came up from the committee, it's a committee recommendation. It's a really good one.
Right.
I
I mean,
don't
well, sorry, Debbie, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know why this doesn't seem like a big deal to me. We should have a code that says we have to have house numbers. It shouldn't be an option. It just shouldn't be. It's safety. There's so many things to it. So I don't know why we just don't write a code well, we have one. Okay, here we are. But why don't we just pass it? I don't get it. I don't know what we're discussing. It just,
The point that Kabir was making, I also made, which is that it was, how does this differ from the county code? In other words, that we're really just repeating the county code in our code. And
Okay.
what are we gaining from that? Now, what was being said is that we're gaining enforcement from that we can bring in our own town enforcement there. But my feeling then was, well, we should be more explicit in the code that there will be particular town enforcement processes in place, because that will then make our code distinctive. At that point, it isn't distinctive at the moment. And that was really what I was trying to say at last council meeting.
I agree with that.
Okay, so I wasn't trying to say we should not do it. I just, Kabir's comments resonate with me. And if we have good reason, as the mayor said, if this is, if our Public Safety Committee has identified this as an issue, as a significant issue that we need to address, then we can do it. And Ron has figured out how. So my takeaway from this discussion is that the council would like to, I guess, vote on the proposed or introduce the proposed language at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Ron, I get just a quick clarification. I guess we introduced it in November, but before we adopted it, we wanted a larger discussion. At this point, do we need to reintroduce it, or can we just adopt it?
Yeah, we've not made any changes, and under the charter, we get 60 days, right? Before we have
Yes,
to reintroduce.
yes.
So the January meeting is on,
9th.
so yeah, we will need it reintroduced, but we could reintroduce tonight at this work session, and then it would be ripe for adoption at the January meeting.
What do the other two of you feel about adding some measure in the code about our enforcement procedures? I checked. I'm not.
Was that
I
beyond-
heard you. I thought
Sorry,
it's-
was that beyond? I'm sorry, go ahead, Council President.
I didn't know if it was for you, Matt, or for Ron.
I meant for my two fellow council members, yourself.
Oh,
and-
okay, sorry.
Sorry.
And to the extent it may help the discussion, Mr. President. So the code currently provides, section 118, any violation of the code is a municipal infraction subject to a fine of $100 unless a different fine is specified. So as currently proposed, the failure to have house numbers on a new or existing house would be a municipal infraction subject to a fine of $100.
Right.
And each day that violation continues is a separate infraction.
Okay.
That's sufficient, everybody? So you don't want to say anything like, we'll do the same as a wall check survey, or would it? when-
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yeah, so the committee did recommend that we put in the ordinance an express requirement that the building inspector review and confirm compliance with that requirement. And I thought, it could just be handled administratively, but we could certainly make it an express requirement for closing out a permit.
So Debbie and Steve.
Okay.
All right, so let's do that then. Okay.
Thank you. Good discussion.
So that would be that we are expressly saying it is the resident's responsibility to install and maintain house identification.
Right, and the building inspector will review it as part of.
And that it won't, right,
final
okay,
clearance.
got
Okay,
it.
so for the January meeting, I need to amend the draft to stick that suggestion or recommendation from the committee into the ordinance.
Okay,
I will do that.
Right, next.
so then we'll just prepare it for reintroduction in January.
Yes, and then it wouldn't be adopted until December. I'm sorry, February.
February, right, right.
Oh, time flies when you're having fun.
Okay. The next, thank you all. Next agenda item is Environment Committee's recommendation for the town to ban the use of single-use plastic for town-sponsored events.
That would include council meetings, yes.
Right, I was about to say, I think this is a great idea and it would have direct impact. We would no longer have little plastic water bottles or use throwaway plastic cups.
The only area where I thought it might be difficult to enforce and might cause some issue is when we do food trucks, for example,
Mm.
that they may give out plastic utensils, things like that, and
Well,
I don't know if that would
That's
be
a good point.
covered or if we
Well,
would have to.
I think that they should all be noted. I think there's no reason not to move this forward, and then they can be noticed if they want to come and testify at the hearing. But I mean, honestly, I think that most of these vendors, they're hip to it because that's an attraction for their customers that they're doing this stuff.
And compostable plates and cutlery are widely available now. So I mean, they can, I've certainly seen food trucks with them. So, you know,
Yeah.
they can do it.
I don't, you know, we're here to protect our residents and to contribute to a better environment, not to worry about, you know, industry. I mean, look how easy it was for all those vendors to accommodate those contractors with the other environmental laws you've passed. So I worried about that is not, you know.
I guess I'd like to hear, you know, like Matt, if you could talk to what it would be like, let's say when we have July 4th, you know,
Yeah, I was just thinking
celebration,
July 4th.
you know, and I don't remember if we hand out water or what, or how would we
We
do
do.
that? So what do we, and when we hand out water, how are we handing it out then if we can't use plastic?
There's water in non-plastic containers.
Yeah, we
Like
could
in
use
what?
water jugs and paper cups.
Yes,
But let's be realistic. You know, yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, I could do that at home. But can we pull it off? Are we putting a burden on the staff to make this happen for us?
It's,
Matt,
well,
I'm asking Matt. You know, is it a burden?
I mean, it's less, I wouldn't say it's a burden. We just wouldn't have it. It's, you know, there may be instances when we would say, you know, we can't offer that because we weren't able to procure, you know, not reusable items or whatever, but I don't think it's a burden at all.
Okay.
I mean, there are volunteers for the July 4th event too, who can presumably stock the water jugs and fill water jugs.
Or
Right.
we can tell people they have to bring their own water in their
We
own,
can do
you
that
know,
too.
in their own
BYOB, yep.
containers. Yeah,
Right.
BYW, bring your own water.
I think this is
BYOW.
an issue that we
BYOW.
should engage our town young people to advocate for.
Okay, I'm playing devil's advocate.
The
That's all.
16-year-olds
it's a
who
good
will
question.
soon be voting can get involved in this.
Let's talk about that at another time, okay? Yes, because our next mayor might be 16. That would be interesting. Anyway,
But that isn't what we're talking about.
I know, you brought it up, not me.
I only said the 16-year-olds. I didn't.
Anyway, I'm playing devil's advocate because I don't want us to make decisions that are going to make it hard for either, you know, our especially our town staff. That's all. I just want to be thoughtful of them. That's all.
I
I'm done.
don't think it makes things difficult for the town staff.
Okay.
I think it's an exciting move too. I think it's really positive. Okay, great. we're charging through stuff. Code amendment recommendation.
Oh,
opt-in,
I'm
right?
sorry, Steve,
Oh.
really quickly before we move on, I just want to clarify, is that so? Ron, is this something that would be just a policy that could be introduced and adopted on the same night, or would that be a code amendment?
I think it's just a policy.
Yeah, it could be either. It certainly could just be a policy. If the council wants the force of law behind it, we would amend the code.
No, I don't think so.
I think we can start with a policy and hopefully keep it at a policy.
Yeah, now,
I'm
No,
with Robbie.
we have our, our general legislative procedures, which say even resolutions ought to go through a 2-month process, introduction and adoption, to allow time for comment. That's a guideline. You don't have to follow it, but that's might make sense to do it that way. Have it written up as a resolution, introduce it one meeting and have a hearing the second meeting and adopt the
Mhm.
second meeting.
That's fine.
Cool, thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Steve.
No, that's it. So the next item is, and thank you for that clarification. Code amendment recommendation with regards to Montgomery County Bill 1322 for all electric building standards for new construction.
Yeah,
Can you,
so this is a new bill just passed by the Montgomery County and it's effective in 2026. So it's got a slow lead into it. And the thing to notice is it's for new construction. So it's for new homes being built in the town would require all electric equipment following the county code. And we'd opt into that, meaning that we would require it in the town the same way that the county's requiring it in the county.
so the only question I have in this, thank you, Robin, is for Ron. I know there have been some county regulations like the Healthy Lawns Act that the town had to opt into. But I thought that the town has already opted into all of the county building codes. We just then impose a few additional ourselves. So is this necessary?
So you're correct. Maryland law provides that with 3 exceptions, taxation, public health, and zoning, towns can decide which county laws should apply in their jurisdictions, and they do so by ordinance. The town already does by ordinance say that we are applying Chapter 8, and this county bill amends Chapter 8, and our town code says any amendment by the county to such a chapters adopted by the town shall become effective within the town to the extent not disapproved by the council by ordinance. So these changes to Chapter 8 will apply in the town unless you expressly opt out.
Right.
Can we opt out of something like that?
Yes,
I wouldn't recommend it.
I think we
you
need to
cannot
talk about
opt
it.
out of zoning regulations. You can't opt out of Chapter 59 of the county code. But I mean, Chapter 8, you could. Or portions of it. I mean, there are other portions where you wouldn't want to opt out because then you'd have to regulate it yourself, like the International Residential Code, safety standards for house construction.
I don't know, I'm gonna look pretty ignorant here, but I might as well go for it. What happens when we get rid of gas? Because that's what the sound, if I'm reading this right, it's like we're gonna, we're not gonna have, we're just gonna be an all electric, county. What does that do to the electrical grid? Does that put an undue pressure on it? Can we ultimately handle that?
There's a 50-page staff report that accompanies the Montgomery County Code that's online that you can read. And they do go into, what happens as we increase, because it's not just electric homes, we're building electric cars too. We are turning everything to electric. And the answer is, of course, that there's real attempts to build up the electric grid at the same time as we're moving to more electric. So we're adding energy to the grid, which is, renewable energy, which is non-carbon related energy. But that's the idea. So we're building up the grid at the same time as we're moving more and more to electric.
All right,
So
I think
building-
someone like me, and probably a good part of our town, will need some education as to what this all means,
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing to say is that this is for new construction, so that if you want a new gas stove in your home, you can have a new gas stove in your home even after this rule is in effect, because it's not new construction. This only applies to new construction. One of the reasons why you don't want necessarily a good new gas stove is that gas actually does give off noxious fumes, which have health consequences, including cancer, actually. And that hasn't been widely known, but is becoming more known now.
So, all right, I just think we're gonna need a bunch of education on this. I have a dozen or so questions for
Well,
another time.
except the bottom line is that all this is that we're showing leadership in advancing when this is going to be implemented, because it's going to be implemented in a few years anyway. It's going to apply. Isn't that correct, Councilmember Barr?
2026.
So the fact of the matter is that because we live in a municipality where lots of people have resources and they can very easily comply with this. One of the reasons why they delay implementation of these kind of laws is because for people that are less privileged, it might be more of a financial burden. But we don't, if there's anybody that claims that this is a financial burden, we should find a way to help them. The same way we offered with the leaf blower, and nobody took us up on it, because we're so blessed that we don't have that kind of problem here. But I just think it shows great leadership for us to weigh in on all these environmental matters, so that we can proudly say that we are doing everything we can to address climate change.
Is
That's
this is
today.
this only for new builds, or
It
is
is
it for
only
renovations?
for new buildings, correct?
Just new. So if I renovate my kitchen and I want to keep my my gas stove, I can do that
You can do
after
that. Yes.
2026.
Yes, you can,
Unfortunately.
as of 2030 or whenever.
Well,
yes.
we could, we have the power don't we have the authority, Mr. Town Attorney? We could make it apply to everything and not just new construction.
This is
So maybe we should do
As
that.
I said in the town meeting, I would not expect to be re-elected if we were trying to do that.
I don't know.
I
Gas
do.
stoves, I think most professional chefs now prefer electric stoves to gas anyway.
Induction, yeah.
And so they've been changed so much.
So where's the gas company in all this? Have they been lobbying against this, or are they joining the fight? What
I
are
don't
they
know.
doing?
I
Well,
don't,
one of the areas where gas companies still have the advantages, and it's also part of this bill, but where they can fight the most is more in terms of furnaces rather than in terms of stoves. It's still the same argument, but there's no doubt that gas furnaces remain more efficient than electric furnaces at the moment, where is not true anymore for gas stoves versus electric stoves.
I'm
Okay.
elected by my environmental friendly citizens. I don't care what the gas company's position is on it.
No, I wasn't asking for their position. I could tell you what their position is without even knowing anything about it. I'm just wondering what they,
Who
have they
cares?
jumped in?
I'm not
Have they
concerned
tried to
about that.
modify things? I don't know. These
Have they
are
been
questions
giving
I
you
think our
have
residents
they been
are gonna
giving you
ask.
have they, I'm just rocking your boat, but have they been giving you
Yes.
campaign contributions? I think we need,
No,
think
these
we
are
should have a
questions.
campaign
questions that-
finance laws in the town.
our residents are gonna ask these questions. And I think we have to think about how we're going to educate them, and me too. Thank you. That's all.
I guess some of them have stock in Washington Gas.
It must be me. I don't know.
Oh, you should disclose that. You need to disclose that on your form.
I'll have to look. I have no idea, okay? I doubt it, though.
So I guess the question is, given what Ron said, that this would apply in the town in 2026, absent action,
Right.
does the council want to take any action, be it sending a letter of approval, or as the mayor suggested, accelerating it, or anything to
I would recommend we send it back to the committee, Environment Committee, and ask them if the town should simply, if they recommend the town just adopt the county code when the county implements it, or do they want us to accelerate it? Or do they want us to have it apply to other than new construction? Or do they want it to not, do they want us to opt out because natural gas is better for the environment? I mean, I don't know, we should ask, they should give us a recommendation, but what they propose is gonna happen anyhow, so there's no action required. I think I got that.
Okay.
right. Okay, this is cool stuff. Okay. Expenditure approval, lighted stoplight installation. So this is where the stop sign would have like a little border of lights and just makes it more noticeable. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, they are solar powered flashing lights on the stop sign, and this is something that the traffic committee had put in their budget requests for this fiscal year. And so the idea would be at targeted areas, they can be moved, and we can try to observe if it makes a difference.
It's just a few, I think it's 3 stops. They're going to put one in, or seeking to put one in at Devon Lane and Dorset on the stop sign. As you go down the hill in Dorset, people tend to run that stop sign to beat the lights. So flashing lights on that stop sign to draw attention to it is one place that would go in. And they put perhaps 2 around the pool, one Uppingham and one in Warwick, to get people to stop, obviously there, because there's lots of pedestrian activity at that point.
How will we measure whether this is a good idea?
All we can rely on at the moment is the national statistics that have been discussed in the traffic committee, and they do increase stop sign compliance. There's no indication yet as to whether they decrease accidents. They're rare, obviously, but they do increase stop sign compliance.
All right. I like them.
So can we approve that? I mean, we have a quorum. Can we approve that now?
I don't think you need to take any action
Yeah,
on
this
it.
is-
It was more just, I wanted to give you an update, and the committee wanted to keep you abreast of what they were working on. And you know, if for some reason you had any questions, to bounce back to them. But I think otherwise, I'll work with the committee to order them. We've got it budgeted, so no action needed.
Okay, great. The last item, I believe, is for you, Matt. Just give us an update on the stormwater mitigation RFP.
Yeah, so and Julie Greenberg is with us, so I just wanted to
Hi,
give
Julie.
a shout out to Julie and to Ellen, who helped put together this request for proposal. I got a little bit of feedback from Doug as well on this, so we have a final draft that's ready to go out. I've already reached out to LIDC and 2 other companies who have all expressed interest in this job. So I expect us to have a few different bids to select from. And let me just pull it up here so I can just give you a quick time frame.
That's great to hear. Multiple.
I believe I said
proposal.
I had bids are due on Friday, February 3rd. And so the idea is that at the February council work session, we can discuss the bids that came in. And then hopefully in March, we can bring in our top choice. They can answer some questions from the council. We can get a contract started and get going from there.
And this one's for the Dorset Essex corner, that mini watershed in there.
That's right. Yep, exactly. So it's sort of building off of the LIDC master plan for the town and expanding and creating a specific plan for that micro watershed. So like I said, LIDC, Julie and Ellen had identified a firm that had been recommended to them. And there was another firm that I discovered that I'd reach out to. So between them, and then we'll post it on the Maryland website, the MML website, so we can hopefully attract a few more people. But we're chugging along on that one, so it's good.
Okay. We are ahead of schedule.
Yay.
Just go around. Does anybody have any other topics they'd like to mention? Raise?
So anything more on the website? Just, I'm always going to ask them that, so.
Yeah, I actually just got an email from them. Let me pull that up for you. Well, let me answer that first. So let's see. Okay. Yep. So they confirmed that the site review was closed. So sorry, there's a specific email that I was looking for here that was helpful. Okay. So the overall process was basically 8 steps, including the go live as the last step. So the first step was doing the initial meetings with the committee and with me. So we did that. We then did, they called it discovery and design approval. So that's kind of where we got hung up for most of the time. That was doing mock-ups of the new website, the home pages, the interior site pages. So we've knocked that out now. They've already finished with HTML development of it. And so at this point, they are working on the CMS enablement and what they call custom development, which is basically that's taking it from just a PDF to an actual workable website that clicks and moves and we can add things to and edit and things like that. They've also simultaneously moved on to step 5. So part of that is sitemap development, which we finished, and content migration. So while they're programming the website, they're also right now in the middle of taking the information from our existing website and putting it over onto this new site. After that'll be, I think that'll take us through basically the end of this year. So they said 3 to 4 weeks for that, starting on December 12th. So by New Year, that will be done, and then we move into quality assurance. So that's just if there's any further tweaking that needs to be modified before we start going into actual beta site testing. So the quality assurance, they say, is another 3 or so weeks. Then training and beta site review is 1 to 3 weeks after that. So that should take us into mid-February or so. And then
Have you approached the communication committee yet with, are you going to help with the beta testing?
I haven't specifically, just because I was kind of waiting until we got the dates ready for that and to
All right.
figure out, but they certainly will be involved in that process. And then hopefully, I think at this point, conservatively, I think by March or so, we should have the new website up and running.
All right, that sounds like progress. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Thank you. I say, Robin, thank you very much for keeping attention on the website. Our current website is really not adequate or appropriate for this town, so
Yep.
I do appreciate that. That's all I have.
Mayor's
Mr.
put his hand up.
So I'm not sure if all of you have seen the Washington Post yet, but there's a story about restrictive covenants that are still in place all over our part of the county. And there's a photo of our
Fairtown.
grand entrance.
No,
And so of course so I'm getting a lot of questions about it. And so as you all probably know, there are restrictive covenants against people of certain religions and Black people and on and on. And of course, they've been and the town attorney can verify make sure he can do fact checking for me. But of course, those have all been unenforceable for years and years now. But a lot of people, a lot of people don't like the fact that they're owning properties that still have these covenants, because it's very costly to get them. You can get them removed, but I think individually, doesn't it cost, $2,000 or $3,000, Mr. Town Attorney?
The county has now said that they will cover the costs.
Wow.
Well, did the county say they will cover the cost?
Yeah, the county does have a new program where you can remove it, and they are waiving all the fees associated with it.
Okay, so ironically, about 6 months ago, at our, we have a mayor's meeting once a month now, Montgomery mayors, and Mayor Compton of Washington Grove brought this topic up because it had arisen in his town. And so I'm gonna, and I just looked it up. I had neglected to send all of you the email. And there's also, I think there in the story, there's also some information about how I believe our Montgomery County state legislators are going to try to bring this up in Annapolis in January. But anyway, I'm gonna send it to you, and then and I'm sure that our industrious town manager is going to get the info out to everybody. I had forgotten that the county will cover it, but it might be up to a certain amount that they're going to do. I don't know what's in the
I don't know the
budget.
details.
In any case, it's this all. I'm sure that our equity and inclusion committee that has been doing a lot of.
Right, the Equity and Inclusion Committee is on it already, actually, as is
Yeah.
the History and Archives
Yeah.
Committee. And they're trying to come up with a step-by-step guide as to how you can remove the covenant from your deed. But the caution is that you cannot remove all trace of it.
Right.
In other words, nor do you want to. History is history. You can't change it. So yes, those covenants were there when these homes were first built, but we can do the maximum possible to remove them now, but we're not going to remove the fact that those covenants were there. That is history, that is real.
And it's interesting because a lot of the covenants are attached to the large, like the Bergdahl tract of
Right.
large tracts of land.
Yeah.
And so we don't have as much information yet on individual properties and whether it's attached to individual properties deeds, or if it just goes all the way back to the original large tract of land.
Well, maybe the state will come up with a law that expunges all this, and this all goes in with all the controversy about denying history and statues and all that, and it's very, it's of course very controversial because, Washington DC is named after a slaveholder. Do we really want to change that name? So it's provocative thought.
Let's change it. to
Where do you draw the line? I mean, maybe we should find out where the name Somerset came from, and perhaps we need to change it.
County of Somerset in
I
England.
assume it's English,
I
right?
know, but where did that, I mean, it might have some, how did it get that name? It might have racist roots. I don't know.
History is interesting. Okay. Great
Steve,
discussion.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I know everybody's anxious to get away. I just wanted to very quickly give you all an update on streetlights to let you know that our Pepco representative is planning to come to our January meeting, as long as you all think would like to move forward with that. And I've actually gone a step above him to the Vice President of Government Affairs, and he's assigning somebody specifically to the town of Somerset to work on our project. So,
Okay.
so hopefully that will help.
Well, I don't know that we want them to come into a nighttime meeting, but we'll talk about that one.
Okay. All right, fair enough. That was it. I just wanted to give you a quick update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, for a great year of running these meetings. And a special happy Hanukkah to Councilmember Heller
And you as well.
and anyone else who might celebrate.
I just got a wonderful
Absolutely.
Hanukkah present. My youngest
You're-
son just walked through the door.
Aw.
So,
You're all
Very
welcome.
nice.
yeah.
Since
You're
we
still talking to
celebrate
your friends?
since we all celebrate your holiday, you're welcome to celebrate ours.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Everybody have a great
night, everyone.
holiday.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.